One of the biggest criticisms that Bleach gets all the time is that it has too much plot armor and how characters on multiple occasions should have died, especially Ichigo, but ended up surviving using quote-unquote assballs for the sake of plot. Hence why I decided to make this video in order to see to what extent this criticism is valid. First of all, we have to define the loose term plot armor, because for some reason lately everybody is throwing this term around whenever they don't like a fight's outcome. The general definition for plot armor is whenever the main character survives a dangerous situation because they are needed for the plot to continue. And I personally find multiple problems with this definition, as it doesn't have to be the main character to be plot armor, it can be any character in the show, and also if the way this character survived the dangerous situation was explained beforehand or at the very least made sense, it shouldn't be considered plot armor. The narrative too plays an important role and shouldn't be neglected. For example, if the sick character survived the situation because their opponent hesitated or was mentally nerfed for whatever reason that is relevant to the narrative, this isn't plot armor as such situations are actually realistic. And remember that the author is the one that has control over every character and situation, so him putting the protagonist, for example, in a hopeless situation that he intends to save him from later using any plot device is not really plot armor but just lazy or bad writing if it was executed badly, as he could have not put his protagonist in this situation or make him capable of overcoming it to begin with. We also need to differentiate between what is an unrealistic scenario or really unlikely to happen in the logical sense and a scenario where the way the character survived contradicts or defies the fictional rules that have already been established. Apply all of that to Bleach and you're gonna realize that most of the criticism is invalid. Bleach does in fact have plot armor in my opinion, but not to the point that ruins the watching experience or the narrative. A couple examples are when Lil Baro shoots multiple Soul Reapers but none of them end up dying. And I think this happened because Kubo didn't know what to do with these characters, so he had to injure them but not kill them as he might need them later in the story. Lily could have easily aimed for their head for an instant kill, or at least those who got donated should have died. Or when a character gets heavily injured but they walk it off or get healed later despite having a seemingly fatal injury. And the reason why authors keep doing that in most mangas, not in Bleach only by the way, is to try and establish the sense of threat, or they are just doing it to shock the current readers. But unfortunately, it ends up cheapening the scene in my opinion when the series is finished. Another example is Hinamori. Yeah, that's it, I don't even need to provide further explanation. But having said that, in most of these cases, had these characters survived or not, it doesn't really affect the plot that much. Maybe it's a little bit annoying, but in the grand scheme of things, it doesn't really matter. But anyways, let's now address the elephant in the room. Do the good guys in Bleach, especially Ichigo, have plot armor? And the answer is mostly no. Let's take a look at the battles that Ichigo fought but survived or won against stronger opponents. His fight against Renji and Byakuya in the first arc. Firstly, Renji was sealed and didn't take Ichigo seriously as he is just a human with Soul Reaper powers given to him, so there is no reason to go all out. Renji thought it was a hydrogen bomb versus a coughing baby type of situation, and also Ichigo's inner powers that were not revealed yet at that time helped him to overpower Renji. And even after that, he didn't really beat him as Byakuya interfered and one-tapped Ichigo just to spare him later for the sake of Rukia. And the way he survived Byakuya's attack that destroyed his Soul Reaper powers is because he had his own Soul Reaper powers in addition to Urahara's intervention and his inner powers healing him. So no, the plot didn't really save him in here. Ichigo and his friends storming into the Soul Society and surviving was planned by Aizen. But as for how did Ichigo survive his fights against high-level Soul Reapers like Renji, Zaraki, and Byakuya, we can't really ignore the narrative side of this fight, as Renji was not actually trying to stop Ichigo, but he saw in him what he couldn't do. Ichigo stood by his ideals even if it meant to challenge the authority of the whole Goti 13 in order to save his friend. Meanwhile, Renji feared what might happen to both of them, so he decided to obey orders even though deep in his heart he wanted his friend to be saved. Hence why Renji swallowed his shame at the end of the fight and asked Ichigo to try and save her. But in terms of power, it was a really close fight as Renji was unsealed although was mentally nerfed. And remember that a Zanpakuto is a reflection of one's soul, so if the holder of the Zanpakuto is having an internal conflict or doesn't fully accept himself, his Zanpakuto won't be recognizing him either and won't be letting him use the full extent of its power. And also, Ichigo at that point has gained immense power in the period between their first and second fight because of Urahara's training. The way Ichigo tied with Zaraki is really simple. Zaraki was subconsciously nerfing himself so that he can enjoy the fights, and that's why he barely beat all of his opponents. and Ichigo's Zanpakuto aided him in that battle by momentarily stopping the suppression of his immense spiritual powers. And after that fight, Zaraki had no reason to kill Ichigo as he wanted to get his rematch. Plus, he never really cared about the Rukia execution thing in the first place. Again, we shouldn't be overlooking the narrative side of this fight. Byakuya didn't really want Rukia to be executed, but rather wanted to uphold to his vow about obeying the law, as he is a noble. However, he didn't have a problem with finishing off Ichigo, which was about to happen if not for White intervention, which is something that was implied to, shown to us but not explained until it was revealed in the 1000-Year Blood War arc. And by the way, White is capable of destroying that version of Byakuya as he is shown to possess a power relative to that of a captain. But Ichigo stops White from cooking Byakuya and decides to fight him without White's help even though he was heavily wounded. Byakuya then has a change in heart after seeing Ichigo's resilience and unchanging will, which is a theme that gets expanded upon later in the full Bring arc, hence why he lost the reason that made him try to stop Ichigo from saving Rukia. Now this is one of the most brain-dead arguments that anybody can make about Bleach having plot armor, as Ichigo got his fair share of ass whooping against Grimmjow, but at the same time they were trading blows and Ichigo even injured him. You can say they were relative even before their fight in the Wakemundo arc. But the reason Ichigo suddenly gotten stronger when Orihime cheered him up is because he was holding back so he doesn't get consumed by his hollow powers, turn into a monster and traumatize Orihime again. So when she told him to do whatever it takes to not die, he stopped holding back and gave Grimmjow the beating of his life. Might have been a bit exaggerated for Ichigo to look cool in front of the Haz, but this doesn't mean it was plot armor. I'm currently preparing a video about the Ichigo vs Ulquiorra clash to discuss its nuances, as it is one of the most important fights from a thematic standpoint, so I'm not gonna get into much detail in this video, but keep in mind that if you don't understand the significance of that fight to the narrative, you will probably be calling its outcome plot armor. On the other hand, if you think that Ichigo's transformation is plot armor, you don't understand even the slightest bit about Bleach. Most of the complaints on this fight is about why didn't Ulquiorra finish Ichigo on multiple occasions, and when he did, Ichigo came back with the typical inner demon taken over. And first of all, Ulquiorra was interested in understanding human emotions because he refuses them and likes to destroy them with facts and logic as he embodies nihilism. So he didn't have a reason to rush killing Ichigo, as 1, he is way stronger than him anyway, 2, he's trying to give him time to see what human emotions are capable of. But from a power standpoint, the moment we see Ulquiorra for the first time, he verbatim states that Ichigo possesses power more than his, but it is unstable, and then tells Grimmjow that if Ichigo goes out of control, he will kill him by himself, which is what he did in their fight. But White saved Ichigo yet again, which was also hinted to multiple times all over the series, but especially in the King and Horse speech. The Ichigo vs Aizen is also one of the most complex fights in the series, and I will probably be analyzing that too as well, but I have already made a video about Aizen in which discusses the reasons behind his defeat. So the outcome of this fight was not really about Ichigo, but rather more about Aizen. And if you're one of those who consider the final Getsuga to be a deus ex machina, it might be to a certain extent, however the circumstances that helped Ichigo gain such ability were already established before his fight against Aizen, so it is not really anywhere near being bad. You also need to keep in mind that Aizen was the one who wanted to be defeated anyway, and even then Ichigo would have never won without the help of Urahara sealing Aizen when he was weakened momentarily by Ichigo's attack. And lastly, I just want to get this off my chest, but neither Yhwach or Uryu have any plot armor. Yhwach is not only the son of the Soul King, the creator and the keystone to all the Bleach universes, but they also hinted to his true powers via the Quincy Emperor song before they were revealed. And even Ichibei feared his true powers, hence why he sealed his eyes so he doesn't have to deal with them. And as for Uryu, I can understand why anime-only fans are complaining about Uryu going on a winning streak as his powers is yet to be fully explained. But trust me when I say this, he has an arguably top 10 if not top 5 hacks ability in his verse, and he is directly linked to Yhwach according to Senjumaru, which scales him so much higher than his pre-1000-Year Blood War version. And remember that all of his opponents in the 1000-Year Blood War arc did not know a thing about his new ability, plus they were not fighting with full strength, either for being caught off guard or because they won't kill their friend.